Morning, professional colleagues. You are welcome to the 2025 Budget Symposium put together by the Public Policy and Advocacy Committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Mr. President, do I have your permission to commence the program, sir?
Permission granted. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Once again, I say good morning, everyone, all professional colleagues and our speakers here present. You're welcome to the 2025 Budget Symposium organized by your institute, the foremost accounting institute in Africa, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Without further ado, let's quickly have the national anthem and the ICAN anthem. Technical, please. Of Nigeria. Without further ado, let's quickly
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians old and proud to serve our sovereign fatherland.
Let's go right and found of treasure in triumph of banner raised, standing stronger in harmony, building our land together. Dreams of a founding fathers, we are striving to attain our fountain values that we share. To all ages be sustained. Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Noble ICAN, noble ICAN, your accuracy we cherish. We uphold your integrity.
Thank you very much. You're welcome once again to the 2025 Budget Symposium. And the theme of the symposium is Nigeria's 2025 Budget, a reality check on the road to restoration. Of course, let me quickly recognize our dignitaries in the house. The very first person that I'll be making known to you, the distinguished professionals, is the Diamond President of our beloved institute, Chief Davidson Chizuki Alaribe, FCA. You are welcome, my president. I also have here the Vice President of ICAN, Alhaji Haruna Humayaya, MNI, FCA. I also have here the chairman of today's session, our revered past president, Alhaji Razak Jayola, FCA. The first deputy vice president of ICAN, who also doubles as the chairman of the Public Policy and Advocacy Committee, Ajia Koinsele Shegosimi, MNI, FCA. The immediate past president of our beloved institute, Dr. Innocent Iweka Okosa, FCA. ICAN Council members here present. The keynote speaker, Mr. Bismarck Rewani, the Managing Director of Financial Derivatives Company Limited, Lagos. You are most welcome, sir. The panelists here today are Mr. Tamino Yakubu, the DG of Budget Office of the Federation, Dr. Chinyere Almona, FCA, the DG of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Olushola Olowoyeye, FCA, co-founder of the New Synergy Specialist Nigeria. The Registrar Chief Executive of our beloved institute, Dr. Larry Olasukami, FCA, professional colleagues here present, members of the public, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. And once again, I welcome you to the 2025 Budget Symposium put together by your beloved institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Curator for today, Tosin Yakimomi, FCA. And what exactly is the objective of this program for today? And like you know, ICAN will not just, this is a culture in ICAN. We don't need on yearly basis in order to create a platform for stakeholders to thoroughly analyze the 2025 budget and assess its impacts on Nigeria's economic recovery and growth. And that's why we are here today, to actually learn from the keynote speaker and also the panelist. Without much ado, I want to invite the chairman of this committee, the chairman of the Public Policy and Advocacy Committee, in person of Adia Kwinsile Shegosimi, MNI FCA, to give us our opening remarks. But standing in for her in this session is the deputy chairman of that committee, in person of Mr. Oladele Nureni Oladipo FCA. He will be standing in for the chairman of the Public Policy and Advocacy Committee. You are welcome, my chairman, my deputy chairman, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Our Diamond President of ICAN, Chief Davidson Chizoke S. Alarabe, FCA, the Vice President of ICAN, Alhaji Haruna Umar Yahaya, MNI, MBA, FCA, the Chairman of Session and Ariva Past President, Alhaji Razak Jayola, FCA, the Second Deputy Vice President of ICAN, Dr. Etofolam Osuji, MNI, FCA, ICAN Council members here present, our keynote speaker for today, Mr. Bismarck Ruwani, Managing Director of Financial Derivatives Company. I also acknowledge our panelists, Mr. Tanimu Yakubu, Director General, Budget Office of the Federation, Dr. Chinyere Almona, FCA, the Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Olushola Olowoyeye, FCA, co-founder, the Synergy Specialist. I also recognize our moderator, Mr. Tosin Yakimomi, FCA, the Registrar Chief Executive of ICAN, Larry Olasukami, PhD, FCA, professional colleagues, members of the public, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Dear professional colleagues and esteemed guests, it is my distinct honor to welcome you to this virtual 2025 Budget Symposium, organized by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. This annual event continues to serve as a critical platform for analyzing and contributing to the fiscal policy direction of our nation. This year's symposium focuses on the 2025 national budget, aptly titled Budget of Restoration, Securing Peace, Rebuilding Prosperity. Presented against the backdrop of the significant economic challenges, including persistent inflation, exchange rate volatility, and fiscal constraints, the proposed 49.7 trillion expenditure budget, which represents a 41.9% increase from 2024, signals the government's commitment to economic revitalization and long-term stability. The diverse perspectives this budget has elicited highlights the urgency for enhanced fiscal monetary coordination, innovative revenue generation strategies, and bold structural reforms. Today's panel of seasoned professionals will provide thought-provoking insights and actionable recommendations to navigate these complexities and maximize the budget's impact on sustainable growth and development. I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude to our distinguished chairman of session, Alhaji Razak Jayola, FCA, a revered past president of ICAN, for his unwavering leadership and support. I also deeply appreciate our keynote speaker, panelists, and the session moderator for their dedication and invaluable contributions to this discourse. I will be remiss not to commend the tireless efforts of the Deputy Chairman of the Public Policy and Advocacy Committee, Mr. Oladile Oladipo, FCA, and the Budget Symposium Subcommittee, ably led by Mr. Francis Ogboko, FCA. Your commitment has been instrumental in organizing this impactful event. As we proceed, I encourage all participants to actively engage in the discussions by sharing comments in the chat box and utilizing the Q&A menu for submitting questions. Your input is invaluable as we work together to develop practical and forward-thinking solutions to strengthen Nigeria's fiscal framework. Thank you all for your attention and participation in this significant event. Together, let us contribute meaningfully to the realization of the goals set forth in the 2025 Budget of Restoration. God bless you and thank you very much. For Ajia Kunsley Segosime, MNI MBA, First Deputy President, First Deputy Vice President of ICAN, and Chairman of the Public Policy and Advocacy Committee. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oladile Oladipo, FCA, for that opening remarks of the Chairman of the Public Policy and Advocacy Committee. Thank you very much, sir. Yes, we got your members are already making some notes that there's an echo. We got those observations, and IT is actually working on that echo. Trust me, it will be fixed. Thank you very much. Without much ado, we want to listen to the welcome address from the Diamond President of our Noble Institute. And to introduce the Diamond President is no other than the Registrar Chief Executive of our Noble Institute, Dr. Larry Olasunkomi, FC, Registrar Chief Executive. Over to you, sir.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Tosin. Good morning, everybody. The President of our great institute, Chief Davidson Alaribe, the Vice President, the First Deputy Vice, the Second Deputy Vice, the Chairman of this session, and the keynote speaker. We appreciate all of you and members, the ladies and gentlemen, joining us for this 2025 Federal Government's Budget Symposium. My task is very simple, it's just to introduce the President of our great institute, the seated President, Chief Davidson Chizoke Stevie Alaribe, FCA. So, Mr. President, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, my registrar. Tosin, can I go ahead? The moderator.
Mr. President, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. The Vice President of ICAN, Chief Malam Haruna Mmayaya, FCA, the Chairman of the session, Chief Alhaji Dr. Razak Jayola, FCA, our keynote speaker, panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my professional colleagues. Good morning, everyone. I don't want to go on a lengthy introduction. The Master of Ceremony has already done that. Chief Dele Oladipo has also done that. I'm only a chief messenger. They say I should welcome everyone. If I start mentioning names now, I may go into storytelling, and that will take a greater part of this seminar, this webinar, which I also want to listen. So as a messenger does not say much proverbs so that he won't reveal the secrets of his masters. My task is simple: to welcome everyone, both the chairman of the session, the panelists, distinguished ICAN members, the general public that are linked up to this. So we want to discuss about the federal government budget. And we have assembled experts, those who know more about this. So it's their duty to tell us what we want to hear. We're also expected to contribute. We can make our comments. Those behind the scene will filter it and bring out to the panelists and the chairman of the session so that we can go ahead. Having said that, it is my singular privilege as your Diamond President to welcome everyone to this great event. Let us relax now and listen to those that will give the lectures, as will be moderated by the chairman. Thank you very much, and God bless us all.
Thank you so very much, my Diamond President, for that brief welcome address. We really appreciate you, sir. Now we want to have the brief remark from the chairman of session, our revered past president, Alhaji Razak Jayola, FCA. Before he comes in, let me quickly take his abridged profile. Dr. Razak Jayola is the chief consultant of AJ Silicon and managing partner of Razak Jayola & Co. He has held several prestigious leadership roles, including President, ICAN, 2018 to 2019, former council member, IFAC, Pan-African Federation of Accountants, accounting bodies in West Africa, Federation of Regional Bodies in Nigeria, and former treasurer, ABWA. Current national engagement, member, Professional Accountants Organizations Development and Advisory Group, IFAC, for the past 5 years, and member, Project Oversight Committee, PAFA, for the past 2 years. Academic and professional achievements, in IT, honorary causa, British American University, Florida, USA, winner of ICAN prizes in auditing, intermediate level, and first merit at the professional final stage. Certifications, certified in risk and information system control, and memberships of ISACA, ISPON, and ACFE. Because of our time, I have the privilege and a singular honor to welcome the chairman of session, our revered past president, Alhaji Dr. Razak Jayola, FCA. You have the floor, sir.
Good morning, all. Are you hearing me loud and clear?
Yes, Chairman, we are hearing you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. President. Our Diamond President, Chief Deputy Chizoke S. Alaribe, FCA, our Vice President, our First Deputy Vice President, Second Deputy Vice President, our council members, our highly distinguished keynote speaker, Bismarck Riwani, Managing Director, Financial Derivatives Company Limited, Lagos, the panelists, Mr. Tanimu Yakubu, Dr. Chinyere Almona, and Dr. Olushola Uluoyeye, the Registrar Chief Executive, the moderator, professional colleagues, members of the public, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm greatly honored to be the chairman of the 2025 Budget Symposium of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. This symposium is a critical opportunity to address Nigeria's pressing challenges while charting a path towards sustainable development. The government has articulated 3 primary goals for this year's budget: securing peace, rebuilding prosperity, and creating a better future for all Nigerians. These goals reflect the urgent need to rebuild trust, restore stability, and lay the foundation for a thriving nation. As we weather the challenges that continue to stretch our resilience, the future is also full of opportunities that can be exploited. Tapping into these opportunities will require unconventional approaches to reimagining and reshaping the country's economic fortune. Indeed, it is time we evolve new strategies that will position our nation on the path of sustainable and inclusive growth, identifying and exploiting the areas of opportunities from the crux of this lively symposium. The theme, Nigeria's 2025 budget, a reality check on the road to restoration, resonates strongly with the yearnings of Nigerians. The budgets of a nation give strong indications of government priorities and provides a signal to where the investment opportunities will be in a particular fiscal year. The thrust of this year's budget focus on increasing oil production to 2.6 million barrels per day, which aims at enhancing revenue generation, improve foreign reserves, and fund critical national priorities, stabilizing exchange rates by targeting an exchange rate of 1,500 to $1, thereby reducing inflationary pressures, boost investor confidence, and create a more stable business environment, and reducing inflation from 34% to 15% to ease the burden on households, increasing purchasing power, and stimulate economic growth across sectors. While these are laudable aspirations, they must be pursued with all sense of urgency and seriousness. And that is why we have a distinguished speaker and panelists to assist us in digesting these aspirations. Unarguably, our nation stands at a pivotal juncture, requiring transformative fiscal strategies to address the socio-economic challenges we face. We must revisit the revenue-generating potential of the country if the 2025 budgets must be given the seriousness and political will that they deserve to boost the revenue base of the country. These reforms, when thoroughly debated and swiftly implemented, will enhance revenue mobilization, improve governance, and create an enabling environment for businesses to thrive. Hence, all stakeholders must agree on a win-win situation for the general development of our country. As we x-ray the 2025 budget, let us all contribute to the rewriting of the narrative in our nation by believing, as enunciated by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that the time for lamentation is over. This is a time to act. I urge all participants to approach today's discussions with positive mindsets, contributing innovative and actionable recommendations that will advance Nigeria's journey towards peace, prosperity, and economic resilience. As I conclude, I thank our rich array of speakers at this program as they avail us of their expertise in dimensioning feasibility of the budget assumptions vis-a-vis other macroeconomic indicators. I equally commend the leadership of the Institute for their commitment to fostering knowledge sharing initiatives like this. I believe that this symposium will serve as a signboard for crystallizing ideas that will lift the 2025 budget from mere policy aspirations to measurable impact. Thank you, and I wish us all a fruitful and insightful session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, amiable chairman of session, our revered past president, Alhaji Dr. Razak Jayola, MCA, for that wonderful charge, telling us to listen with rapt attention and with positive mind and spirit. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, sir. And now we want to listen to the keynote address from the keynote speaker, Mr. Bismarck Rewane, the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company Limited. And let me quickly take the brief profile of Mr. Bismarck Rewane. Bismarck Rewane is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company Limited in Lagos, Nigeria, a macroeconomic research and financial advisory firm. He has more than 40 years' experience as an economist, banker, and financial analyst. He is a chartered member of the Institute of Bankers of England and Wales and a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Bankers. Mr. Rewane has served in the past and still sits on the board of directors of some multinational and Nigerian companies, including Navgas, a subsidiary of Vital, the largest oil trading company in the world, Top Fits Nigeria Limited, and Delta Packaging Nigeria Limited, subsidiaries of Seaboard Allied Company of Kansas City, Missouri, Partian Partners Limited, an African Infra Plus Fund. He is the chairman of FCMB Asset Management Limited and the non-executive director of FCMB Capital Markets Limited, both subsidiaries of the First City Monument Bank Group. He is the chairman of White Cleon Limited, an HR outsourcing consulting company. He serves on the advisory boards of Enkel Nigeria, the subsidiary of Enkel of Germany, and British American Tobacco Company. He was appointed the chairman of PTSC, Presidential Technical Advisory Committee, on the implementation of the new minimum wage in 2019. He was also a director of Guinness Nigeria PLC and Fidelity Bank PLC for many years. Mr. Rewane is a part-time facilitator of the macroeconomic program at the Lagos Business School Executive Breakfast Session. He's also a renowned and acclaimed commentator on the contemporary political and economic issues. Features regularly on many financial and business TV programs, including Panelist TV, CNBC, BBC, CNN, and France 24. Ladies and gentlemen and professional colleagues, I also welcome the keynote speaker for this budget symposium for 2025, Mr. Bismarck Rewane, the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company Limited. You're welcome, sir. For the next 35 minutes, we are going to enjoy this session. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me stand on existing protocols, but I must mention that I'm deeply honored to be here. I'm privileged to speak today. I would like to pay particular respect to Chief Alaribe, who is the 6th state president of ICAN. Now, we are going to have a very brief and illuminating discussion today about the budget of 2025. So in the first 1 minute, I will have to share my slides. If you don't mind, just a minute. Okay, so here we go. So what we've done is to reconfigure your conversation, and we say 2025 budget. Why is it different? Why it is different from other years? We're going to be talking about multiple budgets in 1 year. We're going to be talking about an overview of the Nigeria's fiscal environment and its the economy in general. Then we talk about budget expectations and summary and conclusion. The whole idea is that this is a discussion which will provoke thought and discussion because Nigeria is on a different path today, not necessarily as expected, but definitely inevitable and imminent path towards from imperfect markets towards perfect markets from an economist point of view. Secondly, let me start off by saying here that I'll give you some quotes. Bernanke used to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank, professor of economics, I think at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. now, and I think he won a Nobel Prize not 1 or 2 years ago. He said, the lesson of history is that we do not get a sustained economic recovery as long as the finance system is in crisis. I think he was the one who was chairman of Federal Reserve during the big crisis of 2008, through the Obama years, the toxic asset relief program, and so. Also, we have Sunday Adelaja, who says when the economy of a country is based fundamentally on the principles of truth and honesty, that nation experiences economic stability. So these are standard things, but just to put some context. The budget is as old as mankind. As long as you do not live above your means, it was believed in the past that everything should be okay. But we do know that there are 3 types of budgets. There's the surplus budget, there's the balanced budget, and there's the deficit budget. Most likely, and more likely than none, your countries and states and individuals always live on a deficit budget. In other words, human beings, and the way we are structured and wired, we are more likely than ever to live above our means. So rather than having savings, we will have the savings. And in an inflationary environment, if you borrow today and repay in 10 years' time, the naira or the dollars you are repaying in 10 years' time is less valuable than the naira you borrowed. So in an inflationary environment, it's good to be a debtor, and in a deflationary or disinflationary environment, it's good to be a creditor. So having said that, this slide tells you that there are primitive societies, the ancient civilizations, medieval period, and modern budgeting. But budgeting is a part of history, of finance, and part of management. And if we go further, and I'll come back to multiple budgets in 1 year, there are 4 factors of production normally, as we were taught in economics many years back, that there's land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. What we do know is that if you have abundance of 3 factors, you have excessive land, plenty of land, you have plenty of labor, and plenty of capital, and you don't have the entrepreneurship and management, you are bound to collapse. Therefore, the most important factor or components in the factor of production, to me, is management. And management without budgeting and you are bound to fail. So budgeting is not just about government budget, because we are here to talk about the government budget, but also about budgeting as a process. And no other party, no other institute understands this more than the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, which is the principal, or I would say, not just the pioneer, but in our judgment, the solely recognized Institute of Accountants in Nigeria. But before we go in, I was talking about factors of production. We say this year in particular, we are going to be having, some people say 3, some people say 4, some people say 5 budgets. And why do I say that? I say that because the budget of 2024 is being allowed to overrun till June 2025. So right now, we are running the budget of 2024. We are running the budget of 2024 overrunning to 2025. We also had a supplementary budget for 2024. So budget number 1.
Keynote speaker, sir.
Yes.
Sorry, sir. Participants can barely hear you, sir. They are already sending messages that they can barely hear you, sir.
Okay.
Help us increase the volume, sir.
Well, we'll do that now.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Now, can you hear me better now?
Yes, it's better now, sir.
Okay. Now, sorry, let me go back a little bit. I'm saying that there are budgets this year in 2025. We have what they call multiple budgets in 1 year. One is the budget of 2024, which was approved by the National Assembly. 2, and that budget has been approved to be carried over to June 2025. So you're having the first budget, and that budget overrunning to June 2025. We also had a supplementary budget, which was approved earlier. So you're having the first budget, you have the overrun budget, and you have the supplementary budget. At the same time, the National Assembly is considering the new budget of 2025. That makes it 4. And also, we believe that during the year, with all due sense of humility and responsibility, there will be another supplementary budget in 2025. So it's possible that in this year, we may have 5 budgets. But that's not the point. The point is that budgeting is an integral part of governance, and it also brings about fiscal discipline. I'd already talked about the factors of production, and I think we are fully aware of that. Now, when you hear about the national budget, you have to ask yourself 5 questions. 1, what is your estimate of expenditure? That's a standard question. Question number 2, how much do you hope to earn? What's the estimated revenue? And this happens to both corporates, social, non-for-profit organizations, and governments. If what you spend is more than what you earn, you have a deficit. If what you earn is more than what you spend, you have a surplus. And if they're equal, they're balanced. So the difference between expenditure and revenue will give you your deficit. And I'm using deficit for Nigeria because that's the principal feature of our budgets. Then we now ask ourselves, how do we fund this deficit? How are you going to go about it? Are you going to borrow domestically? Are you going to borrow from the markets? Are you going to borrow from corporates? Are you going to borrow from the central bank by ways and means? Are you going to raise instruments, right? Or are you going to issue bonds, what we call revenue anticipation bonds? Having decided how to fund it, you now ask yourself the most critical question: the budget as a tool of economic management. The whole process, the budget at times is a 1-year, cycle, both for companies and for governments and for other institutions. But 1 year is too short in the history of an institution. 1 year is too short in the history of a human being. 1 year is too short in the history of companies. Therefore, some companies have a strategic plan. The government has what we call a medium-term expenditure framework, which is 3 years. Some of them have a 5-year development plan. And then you situate your budget in the context of this plan to ensure that there's consistency between what you are budgeting, what you are planning, and the outcomes. So if you're looking at a budget as a tool of economic management to see that it's impactful, and you measure it. If you watch the channels news or any of the TV stations, when there's a budget session, they ask you about implementation. We have implemented 100% means that we have spent 100%. Spending 100% doesn't mean that the impact is 100%. As a matter of fact, you could spend 100% and the impact can be negative. In other words, all the money is stolen, but it's spent, right? It could leak. So how we measure budget as a tool of management to see what the impact is and what the effect is on people, these stakeholders. So I've talked about balance, surplus, and deficit budgets. But one thing I want to start with is that we are talking about the federal government of Nigeria's budget, but the federal government is only responsible for 52% of total revenues in the country. Another 26.7% is shared to the states. Another 20.6% is shared to the local governments. So when you are looking at a budget and trying to evaluate it in the context of how impactful it is on the economy, we have to more or less arithmetically multiply the budget amount by 2. So if we are spending 49 trillion naira this year, and that represents 52% of the whole, right? Then it is possible that is when you add the states and local governments, we'll be spending almost 100 trillion naira. What is 100 trillion naira in the context of the Nigerian economy? We'll come to talk about that, but I just wanted to understand that because Nigeria is a federation, you cannot take the federal government finances as representative of the whole finance. Therefore, when people do some comparative analysis and say South Africa, Ghana, and all of that, this is what is in Kenya, those are not federal governments, federations, right? And you have to take that into consideration. So if not, you are comparing oranges and apples. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you would see historically that we've had, I think the last time we had a surplus budget was under the Obasanjo administration. It was a period in which we had some windfall and all that. If not, normally, as far as Nigeria is concerned, we've had a deficit budget. And the way we fund it also leads tells you whether you're going to have macroeconomic instability or macroeconomic stability. When we had Dr. Kojo Wiala as the Minister of Finance in one government under Obasanjo, and again came back under Jonathan, the concept was to have some savings. The concept was to fund the budget from instruments that are issued by the government, right, in the markets. Subsequently, we had situations where we had budgets which were funded by Ways and Means, and the Ways and Means is another technical way of printing money. And when you print money, money loses value and leads to inflation. Inflation has a knock-on effect on exchange rates and many other indices. So I want you to understand the importance of the budget in that question. We've dealt with the 5 questions. We're now doing the problems of the Nigerian economy. So if the budget is a tool of economic management, it can be used to solve the problems we have, or used to strategically position the economy to achieve its long-term or medium-term goals. So what are the problems? And there are many, and I'm not going to waste too much time. Problem number 1 is that we have debt. Problem number 2 is that Nigeria has a high poverty ratio. Problem number 3, we have the highest number of children out of school in the world. The problem number 4 is that we have high inflation. At times people call it spiraling, some people call it galloping, some people call it runaway inflation, but it's 34.8% is not by no means runaway inflation. It only means that if nothing is done, you could end up there. We have an economy where there's distortion, which a lot of imperfections, and imperfect structures lead to imperfect or necessarily suboptimal outcomes. We have problems of subsidies, and subsidies are not necessarily bad, but subsidies on production are better than subsidies on consumption. And subsidies is moving money from people to government. And if the government spending is not efficient, then the entire economy suffers. We also have what we can call slow growth. I don't want to call it low growth, slow growth. Okay. Now, the national budget, we talked about many budgets, and I've talked about 5, but this paper talks about 3. We are talking about the budget has gone from 28.7 trillion to 49.7 trillion, almost double in Naira terms, in nominal terms. But if you take it in exchange rate terms, if you dollarize it, the budget has actually declined by almost 27%. So, and if you look at the budget performance versus the targets, in 2022, after COVID, the budget estimated a growth rate of 4.2%. In actual terms, we came out at 3.25%. The budget had a forecast oil price of $57. The actual price was $98.8. So we had 41%, we had a 41% or $41 increase above the target that we had. Our oil production was targeted at 1.88 million barrels a day. We actually achieved only 1.2. We were basically 0.67 of the targeted thing. So we got only 67% negative, right? The exchange rate that was projected in 2022 was 410 Naira to $1. The actual exchange rate was about 740 Naira to $1. We were 329 Naira below the exchange rate targeted. Inflation was 21 point, target was 13%, but we actually underperformed, and we got an inflation of 21.34. So if you look at this, 2022, look at 2023, same pattern. We projected growth of 3.75, we only achieved 2.45. We projected oil price of 75, we got oil price was above. So our oil price has constantly been above what we projected, but our performance in terms of growth was lower. Our oil production was lower because of oil theft, and the exchange rate wobbled. As a matter of fact, in 2023, the exchange rate projection was 435, and we ended up at 1,158 Naira to $1. Inflation target in In 2023, it was 16%. We ended up at 27%. So now let's look at the most important thing. In the 2024, if you look at what we did in 2024, which is last year, we projected growth of 3.88, and we actually got 3.19. We projected oil price of $77. We got $72. For the first time, our actual oil price was lower than what we projected, so we are negative. And you look at 2024, all the indices are in red, right? In 2022, 2023, there was at least green somewhere. Here is all red. Now, so budget credibility is a concern. And inflation last year, the projection was 21.4. This was announced by the current administration. We ended up with inflation of 32.88. Our exchange rate projection last year was 800 naira to $1. We ended up with 1,538 naira to $1. Our oil production target last year was 1.78. We ended up with 1.43. So as you can see, it was all negative. Now, so we'll go to the next slide now. So from all indicators, it is clear that we're down on GDP growth, and I'm trying to look at now what 2025 will be different from other. GDP growth this year the target is 4.6. I think we could get there because of certain policy initiatives and certain changes that will take place. The oil price of $75 is not realistic. I think oil price, as a matter of fact, today the oil price is at about 73, 72. So it is likely, with all things that we see, the oil price could end up around 70. So there will be some oil shock or revenue shocks. Oil production of 2.06 million barrels, I do not think we'll get there, but we will definitely move because our OPEC quota is at 1.5. So you really cannot bust your quota except you leave OPEC. I doubt so. I think that we could be at about 1.5, 1.6 million barrels. Compared to the historical performance, we'll be doing better. The exchange rate of 1,500 is realistic. At 1,500, as a matter of fact, our projections show that the exchange rate, the PPP value of the Naira is somewhere at about 1,000, 1,100. But we do not think we'll get there in the short run. So we think that the Naira could begin to appreciate slowly sometime in the year towards the end of the year towards 1550 or something like that. But we're not going to start speculating on the exchange rate. The inflation target of 15%, I've said it publicly that it's aspirational. What we see from our projection is that the inflation rate will come down to around 26, 27%, with some luck, maybe 25%. But the government of Nigeria is going to announce next week a reconstitution of the inflation basket and a rebasing of the GDP. Those things have some implications, but let's go in. What we are seeing here, see a couple of things that are very clear to us. That is, government more revenue oriented than growth oriented. What we mean by this is that the government has in the policy community, there are at least for the number of accountants compared to the number of economists is in a ratio of about 5 to 1. So if you enter a policy making meeting in Nigeria and there are 10 people there, your likelihood is that you would have a proportion of economists to the economists will be 1/5 the number of accountants. Accountants are very revenue obsessed, and they are making sure their books balance and make sure that they can they don't have deficits. So there has been a lot of emphasis on on revenue rather than growth. Revenue is good, but it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. You need growth to make the revenues actually achieve more optimality. So yes, our revenue projections are looking much better than it was in the past. And the fact that the revenue, the fact that the deficit as a percentage of GDP is reducing means that the economy is going to be more stable. The fact that tax reforms are being proposed and reviewed means that the tax collected is going to be better, but that does not that does not guarantee that the tax collected will be efficiently deployed. That's another story altogether. So 5 years, our average growth rate is 2.03. 5-year average revenue growth rate is 16%. So you can see that one is far outstrips the other. So now we have look at two things. The size of government activity compared to the total budget. And if we go into that figure, you will see it there clearly that government expenditure is about 4% of total GDP, while consumption is about 61%, and investment is about 34%. So if you look at the national income identity equation, the most important element there is supposed to be consumption. But it is from consumption we are taking money from people and bringing it up to government. The government has a multiplier effect if it is efficiently deployed. But in between those two, you have the investment component, which has a multiplier effect as well. But one item that is not talked about that much is what we call net exports. Net exports used to be as much as 10, 11, 12%. That is the difference between your exports and your imports. Now it's down to 0.2%. If we get this right and increase the net export level, it also means that our exchange rate will strengthen. It also means that we will be able to optimize the use of capital stock and equipment, and that is a major factor. And that is why managing the exchange rate and having an exchange rate mechanism which is efficient helps. It has a much more greater impact on GDP outcomes than most of the others put together. Because if we are in a closed economy, then G and I and C will be adequate. But since we are not in a closed economy, you cannot avoid the impact of net export. And net export, and what happens from there is what you use to service your debt. So I've just gone through that. So what we are seeing here is that, if I can read it right, is that why is 2025 different from previous times? The amount of being raised implies that the amount of deficit on the increase, right? That is true. The deficit is no longer funded by ways and means like in the past, and therefore the inflationary impact of the deficit is not going to be as debilitating as it used to be. Government expenditure increase in government expenditure has resulted in a reduction in subsidies, yes. And subsidies are reverse taxes. So every time you reduce subsidies, you have increased the tax on the people. And every time the people pay more in taxes, they have less money to spend. And subsidies, like I said, you can see next slide there, subsidies are reverse taxes, not revised taxes, reverse taxes. And that takes away from the income of the people, and the people are under pressure. Okay. So Nigeria's fiscal environment, let's look at it carefully and see what it means. Not to bore you with Keynesian theory, which all of you know anyway. Keynes said that it's better to spend money you don't have so that to create jobs and all of that and stimulate the economy into activity, especially. It creates some distortions in the short run, but it helps to create jobs. So even if you are asking people to dig holes and put the sand back to cover the holes, the fact that they've worked and they were paid and they will go and buy something else means that they have increased demand, and that leads to increase in output, and then the increase in output, and so output increases and money supply is constrained. But Keynes did not take into consideration money supply that much, and the effect of that becomes a secondary consequence, which we're not talking about at this time. But actually, the counter-cyclical policy that when economies are in difficulty or slowing down, you use the deficit to actually expand activity and correct the economy back. And then you can use monetary policies to stabilize it and make sure the economy is in equilibrium. So let's not bore you with that, because here we are the ICAN Institute. Now, here we go. So the federal and state government budgets is about $45 billion, 21% of GDP. The size of the economy is at $214 billion right now, depending on how you. But we are going to announce the the rebasing of the economy. And the last time we did the rebasing of the economy, in nominal terms, the economy expanded by 80%. If you use the same factor, and I don't know how it will increase sharply. So let us say today we are at, the economy is at $214 billion. Even if it's 100%, it will come out at 400 or maybe $500 billion. Well, I want you to understand this. The US economy is $25 trillion. The Chinese economy is about $17 trillion. The South African economy, I don't know how much it is. It's about 400 or something $billion, right? So the rebasing of the economy is essentially, to a large extent, it is to update the economy, but it's also cosmetic to a large extent. But so from the projections of my colleagues here, it's showing $385 billion is a likely outcome. So you will hear in the next week or two that the economic size after the rebasing has gone to $385 billion, or probably I would say, if we are very ambitious, they come out about $450 billion. But I don't get excited. Don't get carried away. It's to a large extent, it is true that modern prices, the economy has changed in structure, but $400 billion is not a big deal, right? We are almost at $600 billion many years ago, right? When the Naira exchange rate was fairly okay. So you will hear that. You will also hear, after rebasing, reconstituting the inflation basket, you may hear that inflation has declined from 33% to 25 or 27%. But that's not as a result of a decline in price, it's just a reconstitution of the basket. But there's some reality checks in the basket, and some of it is true. One, the things that you're going to see, one is that food, which used to be about 52% of the consumption basket has been dropped to about 40%. In other words, if you are getting 100,000 naira a month, and you are spending 52,000 naira a month on food, it's now said that you are spending 40,000. And on transport is now up from, transport used to be how much, what percent? Transport in the basket, the new basket is how much? Okay, so there'll be changes. So the things that will increase are transport, communication, which is how much you spend on your telephones, how much you spend on health, right? And how much you spend on accommodation, how much you spend on food. So in other words, your food is coming down and some of these items are increasing. The effect of it, since it's going to be announced by next week, we'll see. So what I want you to expect is that, one, the GDP in nominal terms is going to increase in value in dollar terms too. Two, that inflation is going to decline because of a reconstitution of the basket. But that doesn't mean that the price of the goods in the market have actually declined. And that is where the frustration and credibility gap is going to come in. We are going to be seeing a situation where after the announcement, inflation, let us say inflation comes down to about 25 or 27%, then people ask that, but the price of the goods have increased. But in reality, what we've seen in the last 1 week is that we've seen price of goods actually come down. We've seen rice down now at about 100,000, all the way from 120. We've seen onions back down. We've seen vegetable oil down from 23,000 all the way to about 18,000 or 17,000. We've seen palm oil come down, and we've seen garri actually come down again. So everything, and we've seen pepper come down. So we are seeing all of these things, but they're coming down now because of three things. One, people have no income. In January, they've paid school fees, they've done this, and they spent a lot of money in December. Two, the exchange rate has stabilized a little bit, but there's a carryover. It's planting season, so people don't have that much money. And three, because of consumer, it's income and consumer resistance, people are switching to other commodities. Also, we have some imported commodities that came in under the duty waiver that have just arrived. And so there's a temporary increase in supply. As a matter of fact, in the last 48 hours, You've seen the Naira appreciate all the way from 1685 down to about 1630 yesterday or early hours of this morning. So we've seen those things happen. So this is a deficit, as you can see it. And the yellow lines are the deficit, while the red line is GDP growth. And you can see that after COVID, it came down and it started expanding again. So things are cautiously improving. Government revenue has also, you can see government revenue in 2024 was in red at 13.5%, while expenditure was 18.1%. So the deficit actually now in 2026, right? 2025, we expect government expenditure to be 17.4% of GDP, while government revenue will be 13.2%. Revenue actually declined because of exchange rate losses. But in 2026, the government revenue actually drops to 12.6% of the new GDP, while government expenditure will drop to 16.6%. So, now the government can minimize direct expenditure by utilizing alternative approaches. In other words, you do concessioning, you privatize assets, you toll some roads, and I think you are going to see some tolling soon, and then you will have foreign direct investment. These are just the numbers to show you what the exchange rate looks like. And you can see that government expenditure is only 4.09% of the GDP. Now, so what next? Increase revenue initially, but because of losses, you can see yesterday, the share price of MTN went up to 250, which has not been for a long time. You see all the share prices are increasing because now people are beginning to see that output is increasing, but the cumulative losses of the past 2 years were not going to be wiped out. So you will not see, you will have operating profit and operating income, but cumulatively, there are still some losses to be wiped out. So there will be structural reform in certain areas. There will be institutional reform in terms of the institutions of the FIRS, the central bank, the police force, and all those things are going to be reformed. And hopefully, we will see some outcomes there. But if the reforms are not genuine, the outcome will not be as efficient as expected. There'll be internal efficiencies, which will use digital and technology, and increase productivity and investment. So budget expectations, following sectors to turn around, agriculture will be positively affected. Supply chain disruptions will be reduced. Cost of governance to reduce. That is what the expectations are. And there will be what we can call a fairly optimal structure in the exchange rate sector. Power sector reforms are going to kick in because one, wind, solar, and other renewable energies, but also efficient because of cost-reflective tariffs. You are going to see that. And the tariff review in telecommunication, the concessioning of roads and bridges and airports will help you. And like I've said at the beginning, institutional reform, sale of state-owned enterprises, and commercializing of things. You've seen NNPC, you've seen the oil refineries. In theory, are producing, but in reality, we'll see whether they are viable. So these are the things that you're going to see, but they are game changers. The game changers are the Dangote refinery and petrochemicals, the fertilizer plants. We've seen some game changing in terms of concessioning of roads, which are beginning to reduce logistics costs. We've seen diesel come down, but it's now trading again at 1140 as of this morning. That come down before. Petrol price increases. In the last 2 months, petrol price increases have varied by about 50 to 100 naira, but not as much as before. 6 months ago, we're seeing 100%, 200% increase in the price of petrol, but now it's a very narrow band. So we are getting closer to equilibrium in certain areas, and therefore the violent changes in prices and income that we witnessed a year ago are not likely to happen. Therefore, 2025, which is 2025 into 2026 is going to be a very slow recovery and accretion of things. So my final thoughts, one, the challenges are there. We can talk about them, but it won't change anything. We have to do something about it. There's a crisis of governance, liquidity and debt, and poverty. That has to be addressed. You cannot run away from that. And that cost of living crisis can easily become a political crisis. And the last thing we need is a political crisis. So the budget as a tool of governance will be better managed this year, and I'm confident about that. There's a change in the circumstances. The counter-cyclical fiscal policy aimed at boosting aggregate demand will be there, but the inflationary impact will not be as severe as it had been in the past. Infrastructure spend and capex will be. You can now see in most states and federal and local government, you will see that state infrastructure spending is increasing. But I want to make a point. For Institute of Chartered Accountants, right now, you guys are looking at federal government budget and 36 state budgets. In 2025, 2026, you are going to be auditing 774 local governments in addition to this. So there's going to be more work for you to do, and more training for the public sector, and monitoring of public sector financing. So there's more work. The number of accountants are limited, and the number of good accountants are also even more limited. So you have to bear that in mind. There's a great opportunity, but there are challenges. And yeah, obviously, one cannot tell accountants how to sign off an account, but the world will be looking at us. If you sign accounts and those numbers turn out to be wish-washy numbers, then everybody will suffer. We might think that we are going from a vicious cycle of poverty into a virtuous cycle of growth. I think that's very, very painting a rosy picture. We are not into a virtuous cycle of prosperity yet. We will get there after we overcome certain hurdles. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, Mr. Chief Alaribe, I'm happy to be here, and I will end up by saying that for the budget to be effective, and institutional reforms are essential, and we will have no choice but to follow up to ensure that the Oronsaye report, the structural changes that will come about, our relationship with the IMF, the World Bank, and other agencies, multilateral agencies, is important, and we have to behave like a credible country. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow, that's a great one. Thank you so very much, Mr. Bismarck Rewani, the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company Limited. That's a great one. I can see our members already sending smile, appreciating the good work you have done in the last 40 minutes, taking us through 2025 budget and actually letting us know some major things, the crooks that we must know. I would say an albino has no hidden place in the market, and that is Mr. Bismarck Rewani for you. You've taken us through the budget performance. You also took us through the comparative analysis of the last 3 years' budget. You also considered how realistic the budget indicators are, looking at the GDP, the oil price, the exchange rate, the inflation rate. You also took us through the impact of the budget and told us why this year budget 2025 is different. That's a very good work. We really appreciate you for coming. Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate you. And now, participants, please, there will be question and answer within this session. So you are advised to use the Q&A icon. You will see the Q&A icon on the face of your screen. You just go in there and drop your question. When it is time, we'll pick those questions and relate to our speaker and other panelists. Thank you very much once again. So, very one line that strikes me the most in the presentation is that the budget as a tool for management must complement other reforms. That's a great one. It strikes me so much that the budget as a tool for management must complement other reforms. Thank you once again, sir. On behalf of the Institute, we appreciate you. Now let's quickly go to the panel session presentation for them to react to the keynote speaker address. And the very first person that will be coming on board is Dr. Olusola Oluwoyeye. Dr. Olusola Oluwoyeye, and he'll be quickly taking his presentation for the next 15 minutes. Before he comes on board, let me take his brief profile. Dr. Olusola Oluwoyeye, FCA, is a co-founder of the New Synergy Specialist Nigeria. He is a multi-skilled consultant and dynamic professional with core dexterity in financial management, risk management, financial advisory and investigation, due diligence, taxation, business strategy, forensic auditing, oil and gas strategy, corporate governance, and ESG leadership development. Dr. Olusola has 2 master's degrees in finance and professional accountancy and a PhD in management from USA. He has 2 decades in financial services, manufacturing, consulting, oil and gas industry. He is a fellow of many professional institutes in Nigeria and abroad, including our very own institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Nigeria. He sits on the board of several companies and has organized several strategy sessions globally in financial services, manufacturing, oil and gas, health and entertainment industry. He is a co-founder of one of the gold ALP of ACCA, and that is the New Synergy Specialist Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, and professional colleagues on this call, please help me to make welcome Dr. Olusola Oluwoyeye, FCA, the co-founder of the New Synergy Specialist Nigeria. And he takes us through his presentation for the next 15 minutes. You have the floor, sir.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me on this call this morning. And my special thanks to the entire Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, led by the able and our powerful Diamond President, Chief Alaribe, and also the other council member, and most especially also again today is the chairman of this particular event, Alhaji Razak Jayola, for that wonderful presentation we had earlier. And to the keynote speaker, evergreen, ever refreshing every time we hear from our keynote speaker. To my other panelists and ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues and guests on the call, I'm happy to be on this call this morning, and I would like to share my thoughts and make some feedback and response to what the keynote speaker has shared with us today. Let's imagine a nation standing at a crossroad with a promise of prosperity as one of the parts and challenges of economic recovery. This is the narrative Nigeria has found itself. Our 2025 federal government budget, titled Budget of Restoration. As we embark on the journey, which we have started today, to dissect and look at this budget, and our keynote speaker has really, be able to do a very good diagnostic and giving us, a proper view to look at the whole of this. Looking at the regulatory framework, the sectoral allocation, how the budget has been allotted, broader economic, implications, and how this will shape the future of Nigeria going forward. But I would like to start by making this very comment, and it's from one of our own, Taiwo Yedele, who says, "May Nigeria work for me." May this budget 2025 work for every one of us. And I think our keynote speaker also, alluded to that in his final speech, that for us as professionals, for us as accountants, there's a lot of work for us to do. Beyond just dealing with the federal government budget, dealing with the 36 states, we need to also start looking forward to how to address, the local government, over 700 of them. And there's a lot of opportunity lying ahead for capacity building and quite a lot of advisory work that needs to be done. By way of introduction, let's look at this. Africa's story has been written by others. We need to own our own narrative and tell it the way it should be told. This by our own Chimanda Ngozi Adichie. We need Nigeria 2025 budget of restoration to reclaim the country's economic trajectory and build a narrative of resilience, innovation, and growth. And I think our keynote speaker made specific pronouncement as regards this, that it's not just about revenue, but we need to really see growth. And that's why I also look at what Barack Obama said. He says, a budget is more than numbers on a page. It is an embodiment of values. So it's important as we take an overview and look at most of the key spotlight areas of this budget, speaking to health, an apportionment of about 2.4 trillion, education about 3.5, infrastructure about 4.06 trillion. And the total budget is looking at about 49.7 trillion. And, defense and security taking almost like 4.91, trillion. It tells you a lot that, there's something about this budget that, we need to all be very aware of. And I think the keynote speaker has also addressed most of the key indicators that we need to be mindful of. But just to pay particular attention again to the fiscal deficit element of it, we need to be very more careful because we are looking at 13.39 trillion, approximately, about 3.87% of the estimated GDP, which is going to result into a bit of, being able to cover that gap. And we need to watch very closely our GDP to the kind of deficit, the debt that we're trying to use to fund. And it's important looking at what the oil price is saying, and I think our keynote speakers address what we need to be mindful about. And then in terms of the production target, it's something that we need to also watch very, very carefully. But if we are very successful with quite a lot of initiatives that are coming on board, we might, be able to land something a bit more stable in this year. It might not necessarily be too far away from what, is being projected. And, like the indicators for 2024, highlighted by the keynote speaker, clearly shows that there are quite a lot of red, but, we're open, we are believing very strongly that 2025 will be different, because there's something that the keynote speaker also highlighted, that 2025 happens to be a very different budget from others. I would like to quickly also look at what our own Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who is also in the forefront of trying to support in this conversation. Nigeria is not a country to squander its future by clinging to mistakes of its past. And that's why I needed us to embrace this budget with a lot of hope and, work in optimism to make sure that we are able to take this to the next level. Because budget role in addressing past fiscal inefficiency and laying a foundation for sustainable development and economic restoration, which is what Budget 2025 is speaking to. And John K.F. Kennedy mentioned, he says a nation that doesn't invest in infrastructure is a nation planning to work for failure. And I think if we go back to my earlier slide when I highlighted how this budget is being allocated, health is taking 2.4, education 3.5, infrastructure 4.06, defense and security 4.9. Significantly, 4.06 is going into what? Infrastructure. And this is something to note. In terms of the philosophy of the budget seeks to restore, economic stability and make sure that as a nation, where business environment is also enhanced, and it also encourages us to be able to foster inclusive growth, opportunity for more employment and poverty reduction as much as possible. It also promotes equitable income distribution and human capital development, and that gives us, as professionals opportunity, to operate within the capacity building space, be able to support, in our own way. And the Institute is doing a great work in this regards, in supporting to make sure that, people are becoming more aware and people are able to lash on more new opportunities. And so looking at the aim to drive inclusive growth, employment generation, and poverty reduction, this is really, one of the key, strong parts of this year budget. And it also centered at securing peace and rebuilding world prosperity. The budget sets strategic direction for sustainable economic recovery and development. So looking at the strategic impact of this budget, what we call the budget of restoration, even though Nigeria's economic challenges, we need to rebuild public trust and set the nation on a sustainable path towards inclusive growth and development. So what I've tried to do in my presentation is for us to look at those strategic impact, most especially in terms of fiscal consolidation and economic stability, how we are able to, manage debt, because the debt to revenue ratio, through more efficient, borrowing and enhanced debt management strategy, we need to speak to revenue diversification, which the government is trying to expand non-oil revenue sources, such as taxes and public-private partnership, which will reduce our over-reliance on oil. It's important that, all this initiative, we're able to also position ourselves to be able to work to support in the process. So also in terms of monetary policy alignment, in terms of collaboration, with CBN to ensure fiscal and monetary policy works in harmony to control inflation and stabilize the Naira. And I think our keynote speaker also made mention about this. It might not be so very significant, but we should expect that after the rebasing of the GDP, we might be seeing some traction in this area. And he also made mention that most of the food items, significantly, no matter how, have experienced some, decrease. So we are on the path of, restoring hope. And then it's important that we take note of this indicator. Number two for me is the infrastructure development and the economic diversification. Because this budget also prioritizes infrastructure, which I mentioned earlier, to stimulate growth and create jobs, particularly in critical sectors like energy, agriculture, and manufacturing. So industrial growth, investment in power generation and transportation will enhance productivity in agriculture, mining, and manufacturing. And it also targeted spending on labor-intensive infrastructure projects, which will address unemployment, especially among the youth. And then, in terms of attracting investment, improved infrastructure will enhance Nigeria's competitiveness, making it more attractive to domestic and foreign investors. And then number three, as regards the impact, has to do with issue around social inclusion and poverty alleviation. So this budget provision also made provision for social programs to aim to tackle inequalities and improve the living standard, most especially human capital development. Spending on education and healthcare will ensure long-term economic benefit by building a skilled and health workforce. Also, there's room for social safety nets, program targeting vulnerable population, which will reduce poverty and create more inclusive economic opportunity. So also, there's provision for empowerment of women and youth, specific initiative to support entrepreneurship and skill acquisition among women and youth will foster broader economic participation. And then number four has to do with governance and accountability. We can then, we can start seeing impact in the areas of transparency in public finances, most especially with more investment in capacity building for civil servants on public financial management, on issue around sustainability, on issue of even using artificial intelligence to be able to support their work, the use of technology. We've seen the likes of the Give Me's and to improve accountability and reduce corruption. Also enhance service delivery, which we started feeling some of the impact in some sector. A more performance-based, government spending, delivering more measurable outcomes that is aligned to national priorities, and then more public-private collaboration as a result of this. So stronger partnership with private sector will drive innovation and efficiency in the public project. Also, one of the key impact will also be on the area of sustainability and climate reliance. More areas has to do with issue of renewable energy investment, increasing funding on solar and wind energy projects would diversify the energy mix and reduce the carbon emission. Because that is another part of the economy and the sector that needs to move to the next phase. We've seen the kind of things that happen within 2024 in that space, increase in tariffs and quite a lot of things, and then we need to move to the next stage of having more stable stability in that regards, and then climate resilient agriculture to support smart farming technology, which will help to mitigate the impact of climate change on food security. And then also we need to start attracting green financing by leveraging global climate funds and green bonds will boost resources for sustainability projects in our space. So restoring the hope and building resilience. The 2025 budget of restoration is not just a physical document, but a blueprint for rebuilding trust, revitalizing the economy, and ensuring a sustainable future for Nigeria. It is a strategic focus on fiscal discipline, infrastructure development, social inclusion, governance, and sustainability that lays foundation for long-term growth. By aligning this budget goal and ensuring effective implementation, Nigeria can chart a path towards economic recovery, resilience, and shared prosperity. Now, looking at some key issues that were addressed by the keynote speaker. First, there was areas around issue of high debt. Nigerian debt stands at about 138 trillion with fiscal vulnerability due to declining revenue and rising expenditure. Our keynote speaker also addressed the issue of a 29-year high 34.8% inflation after purchasing power and living standard. One of the keynotes that was also highlighted by our keynote speaker was the multiple budgets that we're going to be having this year. I remember making reference to the supplementary budget that we had in 2024 that will be running into June 2025, and then we have the 2025 budget, and then the chances that there will be supplementary budget in this year 2025 also could result us in having 3 to 4 budgets to deal with in 1 year. So this creating complexity in fiscal execution was one of the economic challenges that our keynote speaker has highlighted to us today. He also made mention about the issue of revenue versus growth, a heavy focus on revenue generation, and I think he was talking to us more as accountant when he mentioned that a lot of focus on revenue than economic growth, despite the 2.03% average GDP growth over the last 5 years. Issue of deficit management is also one of the things that he highlighted, most especially persistent reliance on deficit financing with high borrowing costs in a rising interest rate environment. This was broadly addressed. And then the issue of structural reforms, emphasis on structural reforms like institutional efficiency, open market, and privatization to boost productivity and reduce fiscal efficiency. Our keynote speaker also today also made mention about the infrastructure investment, highlighted as key to economic recovery, but requires innovative financing, which we can do through PPPs and foreign direct investment. So just to be able to put things in perspective and, you know, for us to have a much more robust conversation and for us to be able to address quite a lot of questions. I know our audience, you know, who want us to really be able to delve into some specifics. I look at some key questions, you know, as a result of what the keynote speaker has shared with us today. And one of it is what makes the 2025 budget of restoration different from previous budgets. If we look at 2025 budget of restoration, the budget addresses lingering structural challenges through practical reforms such as subsidy reductions, realistic fiscal projection, and emphasis on public-private partnership. Unlike previous years, it shifts focus from short-term fixes to long-term sustainability by prioritizing revenue diversification and efficiency. I also look at another major one from what our keynote speaker have mentioned today, which has to do with how does the budget tackle Nigeria's high debt and fiscal world deficit. And our keynote speaker made this very clear in his pronouncement. He says the budget reduces reliance on unstable ways and means. This is what we used to have as a way of financing. Instead, is adopting a more transparent borrowing mechanism, which emphasizes on revenue generation through tax reforms. And you can see what Taiwo Oyedele and his team are doing, the presidential committee, and looking at the direction that, you know, they are going to take, you know, widen the tax base net and, you know, getting more, you know, people, you know, organizations and some informal sectors to start, you know, being able to start paying tax. And then enhance compliance and economic diversification to stabilize debt to GDP ratio. This is also one of the key, you know, highlights that I noticed from the keynote speaker's presentation. He also talked about what strategies are in place, you know, to ensure effective implementation of this budget. And that's why this government is focusing on institutional reforms, leveraging technology for transparency, embracing, data analytics, using more of technology to drive things, promoting accountability in public spending, you know, monitoring frameworks and performance-based budgeting will help us track the progress. And, you know, we just need that, you know, continuity and ability to continue to make sure that we are in the face of making sure that all these are properly implemented, proper execution, we are able to start delivering what results. And then when you look at the strategies that are in place to ensure that the implementation of this budget, you know, we continue to leverage on technology for transparency, promoting accountability in public spending, and monitoring the frameworks to ensure that performance-based budgeting helps us to track all the outcomes. In looking at potential risk of this budget not being achieved in terms of its objective, it's important that we know that there are quite a lot of, you know, external shocks that, you know, in terms of price volatility, we can already see it happening with the crude oil price and, you know, with the new US president and, you know, quite a lot of pronouncement is already creating some shocks already. And, you know, ineffective implementation of the reform or weak institutional capacity and persistent structural challenges like over-reliance on import and inefficiency tax system will not allow us to get to where we would desire to get to on this particular objective. So just to put a hold while we expect other questions to come, I would like to wrap up this my short 15 minutes presentation by saying God bless Nigeria. Thank you everyone for listening and, you know, for participating actively in this particular conversation. Over to you, the anchor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olushola Olowoyeye, FCA. It was a brilliant presentation, I must say. And I can actually see the participant also reacting to your presentation as saying, thank you so much for a good job done. In 15 minutes, you've given us an overview of the 2025 budgets. You've talked about the philosophy of the Nigerian budget. You've talked about the strategic impact of that budget considering the various industries and sectors that would have direct and indirect impacts that the project will have impact on. And you have also looked at the key issues raised in the keynote speaker's address just within 15 minutes. That's a brilliant one, I must say. Thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate you. Once again, the participants will still continue with the panel session presentation, but surely we are seeing your questions and we will take them during the interactive session. But let me once again announce to possibly those who are just joining the call that even this icon, don't just go there. If you have questions, drop in your question there. And at the appropriate time, I'm sure that we'll take your question. Thank you very much. Now, moving along that path, we are going again to continue with the panel session presentation. Now we are going to be calling on Dr. Chinyere Almona, the Director General of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It is a privilege to have you on this call today, madam. But before you come in, let me quickly take your brief profile. Dr. Chinyere Almona, FCA, the DG of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Chinyere has over 30 years of diversified leadership and management experience. She is an expert in corporate governance and has experience working across private, non-governmental, and international development sectors. Dr. Almona is currently serving as the DG, Chief Executive Officer at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the foremost chamber of commerce in West Africa, established in the year 1888. Dr. Almona is a fellow of many professional institutes in Nigeria and abroad, including the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. He has a specialist MBA in corporate social responsibility from Nottingham University Business School, UK. He holds a doctorate in business administration from Business School, Netherlands. He is a certified leadership coach with Certified Coaches Federation Canada and a certified cognitive reflex conditioning practitioner. Ladies and gentlemen and professional colleagues, please welcome to this session Dr. Chinyere Almona, FCA, the DG of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Madam, you have the floor for the next 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akinwumi, for that very warm introduction. And thank you to everyone on this Zoom call. I really want to appreciate the leadership of ICAN for this honor to be at this year's webinar. And it's a real privilege. I think I joined at a time when Mr. Bismarck was speaking. And I must say, every time I listen to Mr. Bismarck Ruane, it's always fresh. It's like every time you listen to him, it sounds new. So thank you, sir, for that very well-articulated presentation. You, like I said, often say when I speak after you, when I have a chance to say a few words after you. Sometimes I'm kind of really depressed by the presentation, like, oh my goodness, all these things that we have to do. But at other times, I think in recent times, I'm inspired and energized listening to you because I feel very hopeful about where we are going to and the changes that, the reforms that have been introduced. And though it's difficult now, but we see light at the end of the tunnel. And I also want to thank Mr. Shola Oluwoyeye for that brilliant presentation. In fact, after listening to Mr. Bismarck Ruane and listening to Dr. Oluwoyeye, it's difficult to find anything to say. So I'll very quickly go through a few slides that I have, just to give some perspective of my thoughts around the budget. I hope you can see my screen. Okay, so just to give, like I said, a few, my ideas, I'm looking at the potential impact on the Nigerian economy. I'm looking at some positive and perhaps not too positive effect of the budget. Like Mr. Bismarck correctly said, the budget is a tool, but that tool, it will depend on how we use that tool. Okay, so there are several tools. I mean, if you think of a carpenter or any profession, they have tools, but your ability to make success will depend on how you use the tools. So how are we going to use the budget? The day the president delivered the budget to the House, I think I was on a TV program, and I think the subject of the budget came up, and I said to them that, look, I am very, I'm glad about the way the budget is going. It looks very nice. I'm really happy. But of course, I'm thinking implementation, because that's where we always get it wrong in this country, that we have very laudable ideas, very laudable reforms and initiatives, but then it dies on the table of implementation because there isn't proper accountability for the things that we need to do. There isn't proper monitoring of the things that we need to do, and somebody being sure that we are doing it. And if nobody holds anybody accountable, there are no consequences. If I do or I don't do, it's fine. And we can't just keep going on. We are Nigerians, yes, we keep going on. So I believe that the budget being a tool, our ability to then be successful at the end of the year will depend on how we use the tool. So I just want to look at a few things on the budget, and then we can maybe close with questions. So the budget emphasizes the need for fiscal and monetary policy alignment. And that's what, a lot of times when the chamber issues a press statement after one reform or the other, or after the MPC meeting, we always say, look, there isn't a proper handshake between the fiscal and the monetary. And so it's as if, you have they are both at the fiscal and the monetary, the CBN, the Ministry of Finance, they are two ends of the boat, and they are rowing in two different directions. That means we're not making progress. We need to row in the same direction. We need to have conversation between the fiscal and the monetary to be sure that we can tackle inflation, we can, exchange rate volatility, we can deal with it. Because if you look at inflation, or even with the rates that is being hiked, and businessmen can't find funds because credit cost is too high, it's still the same thing. How are we at the monetary side understanding that the real sector needs funds to run, to expand, to do business? And how are we on the fiscal side to have policies or guidelines that will enable the real sector to run? So even if I get funds from the banks at a low rate, and there's no ease of doing business, the environment for business is not enabling. It doesn't matter how low the interest rate is, I won't succeed. So there needs to be harmony between those two sides so that the businessmen can actually do work. Because I'm at the chamber, I will speak for the private sector, that we're ready to work, we're ready to roll up our sleeves and work, but we need an enabling environment, and we need to be able to access funds to be able to do all the things that we can do. And then we can lower the poverty rate, we can employ people, and we can do all of these things that the budget is saying we need to do. So it's important that we ensure that. Next is the issue of the revenue targets and reforms. Okay, so the budget, and we've heard that over and over, is an ambitious revenue target of 36 trillion. Anything is doable. We can do 50 if we get the conditions right. We can do it. We're a nation of 200+ million people, and so there is just a lot that we can do. Plenty of potentials. The West sees so much potential in us, but then we are not. We're not leveraging. We're not harnessing the potential. So yes, it's ambitious because of the conditions that we have struggled with all these years. So it seems like, oh, how do we even get here? But it's doable. We have to pay attention to the key strategies. Of course, the tax reforms. Dr. Shola talked about the tax reforms extensively. I'm on the committee, so I know that we've done great work. We've done a lot of work. However, there's just been so much struggle with actually then passing it. A lot of times when I hear people talk about it on TV and on various platforms, I listen. I'm not even hearing facts and figures. I'm just hearing sentiment. Oh, I feel that it's going to do this. Oh, I feel it's going to do that. Nobody's paying attention to the core. A lot of work has been done, and we need to be able to engage and then say, how do we make this work? We can talk all the nice talk. If we don't pass this Tax Reform Act and just get it going, we will not move as much as we want to move. Tax to GDP is not exactly very high. So we need revenue, right? We need a lot of revenue. And this is one way. It's even a low-hanging fruit. All we need to do is tweak it a little, once we can enable the private sector to do work, they are more productive. And with increased economic activities, people will pay tax. People will pay their taxes. Why? Why not? But when we are struggling, you know, the private sector is being pressured from every angle. There are formal taxes, informal taxes everywhere. If you breathe, they tax you. If you cough, they tax you. We are not even allowed to think or to be productive. So if we can get the tax reform working and also close the loopholes, close the leakages, there are so many leakages, and then we can ensure that, you know, our revenue collection will increase. It will be enhanced. Why won't it be enhanced? So we need to do this so that we can also use technology and enhance collection, expand the tax net, tax the people that should be taxed, and not kill the people that are being taxed already. So we need to kind of do the things that we need to do. We also need to optimize non-oil revenue streams, and this is very crucial. And there are so many opportunities to optimize non-oil revenue. I think, you know, this thing about, oh, the oil, but if you look at the mining sector, you know, the solid mineral sector, there's like, if you think about the number of solid minerals that we have in this nation, we are so blessed. But then we want to mine. Even when we mine, we don't have the facility to add value. So we are shipping you know, solid minerals abroad, and then they will change it and bring it back. And then we're paying billions to bring it in. It's incredible the way we waste things in this nation. So we need to think through, you know, the non-oil revenue streams and mine them. Think property, real estate. There's just so much we can do in this country. So this 36 trillion is doable, but we need to get our acts together and do things right. So if we are going to be able to unlock the opportunities that we have, even with tax and everything, we will be sure that we will dust 36 trillion and keep going. The debt management and fiscal space, I think one of my pet peeve is the debt servicing cost. Debt servicing cost is so much. At some points, we need to get to the point where we're asking ourselves, what are the terms of the debt that we're getting? Who is making the decision? Are there consequences for making the wrong borrowing decision? Because if we get the terms right, the tenure, you know, all of those things, if we get them all in the right sequence, then our debt servicing may be lower. And then we may need to go back and renegotiate. We need to have people on the table who can, you know, have those conversations, renegotiate and reduce, you know, the interest, increase the tenure, and make the debts, you know, valuable. But also, why it's so annoying is that we're paying so much, but then we're not using it for the right things. So if we don't use it we need to use it for the things that will, you know, catalyze production. If we don't catalyze production and economic activities, then we will pay such high servicing costs and we'll be nowhere because we have filtered the money away and there's nothing to show for it. So prudent debt management is important. Focusing on, you know, improving revenue inflow is critical. Exchange rate. I think I've heard about exchange rates. Even when Mr. Bismarck was talking, he talked about it a bit. For me, we try to harmonize the exchange rate. And the point was, let us reduce arbitrage. Let us reduce all this round tripping. I go to CBM. I get at a low rate. I walk across the street. I sell it, and I go home and I smile, and the economy is not moving at all. Let's try to get away from that. Let's harmonize it so everything is clear and transparent. But we see that today, the difference is now beginning to increase again. I think at some point it was less than 50 naira, or, you know, it was getting smaller and smaller. Okay, let us see how we can increase production, increase export activity, enhance liquidity so that it will work. But now the difference is also then beginning to increase. So we need to watch it. We need to ensure that this unification that is working for Nigeria and the Nigerian economy. If we don't resolve the structural inefficiencies and policy misalignment, it will, of course, be risky even for our exchange regime. And if we don't fix our exchange regime, a lot of the things we discuss and describe today about, oh, the exchange rate is so high, and so everything you touch, if you want to even like the telecom industry, their equipment, everything is brought in. And so with such a high exchange rate, it's difficult to do business. And so that plows back into the consumers, because you have to pay. If things, common things like food, education, all of these things are benchmarked to the dollar, you have to pay. You have to survive. So everybody's trying to prioritize things, but I believe that our authorities are taking this on board. If the proposed exchange rate in the budget is 1,400, let's hope that there'll be enough, tightening of belts, even at every level of government, to be sure that we are producing and that things are going to work. I was really glad about the infrastructure, the focus on infrastructure. The increased allocation to capital expenditure is fantastic. It's a welcome development that now we can begin to pay attention to infrastructure, because if you don't have the right infrastructure, the organized private sector will be struggling. Some of them will create their own infrastructure, and that's adding to the cost of doing business. But if we have the right infrastructure, the roads, the road network, have rails and things that will help trade to work, then we know that the cost of doing business will begin to moderate, and then we can see things happening in the sector. In all the sector, we need the right infrastructure, in telecom, in agriculture, in all the sector, So I'm happy about that, and I'm hopeful that at the end of the year, we can even do it just slightly above this 12.5% increase. That would be fantastic, because it will help everybody and to ensure that production is happening. And so if you're able to assure and provide assurance for ease of doing business by investing in infrastructure, you'll be able to attract private investment, you boost productivity, you will encourage employment, and things are going to improve. So I was a bit cautious. I was wondering about the declining allocation for education, and I was a bit, how are we? Is this a good match? So we invest in infrastructure, but we don't invest in education, right? That means that, so some of the things that you're putting in place, some of the things that you're investing, who will do that in the future? Who will carry it on in the future? How do we ensure that we have the right skills? Because one of the problems that we have today in certain sectors will be low skills development, that we don't have either low skills development or mismatch of skills to the available opportunities that we have. So if we're going to the industrial sector and we don't have the right vocational skills for people to actually do industrial work, then we can speak all the grammar we want to speak around, we want to industrialize, but we don't have skills to ensure that industrialization happens. So it's important that we take another look at the allocation to education, but also the allocation to health also. That's, for me, is a red flag, because today we keep complaining, doctors are going on strike, the healthcare, you go to somebody was saying on the radio yesterday that if you do a test in one hospital, please go to multiple hospitals and do the same test, just to be sure that your result is okay. Because in some places they use reagents that are expired and all of this. This is the fact that we're not paying attention to our health sector, and we're all getting old. Everybody will get old at some point. And even if you don't get old, okay, the young ones, they also need, with where things are going, we need to pay attention to our health sector. Also, with this declining allocation to education, we also think about the out-of-school children. The rate of out-of-school, is so high, and it appears to be increasing. So if we're not paying attention to education, that means that is going up. And if your out-of-school rate is increasing, all the money you're spending on security, you have to double that, because everybody who is out of school and hanging around, they will find a sector. Now, kidnapping is a sector. All of these things, Yahoo is a sector. If you don't pay attention to education, you are creating a bubble that will burst very soon. And so when you're saying want to pay attention to security, please deal with the social issues. If you deal with the social issues, you can reduce your security concerns. Oil, so the target is 2.06 million barrels per day at $75 per barrel. So this is a 56% of the government revenue, which shows that perhaps government, if you had perhaps oil and gas as maybe 30 and you have other paying attention to all the other things, it may be good, but we are still saying 56%. It's okay as long as we pay attention to the things that will ensure that we get this 2 million. Oil theft, we've been talking about oil theft forever. Oil theft is still an issue. Pipeline vandalism is still an issue. Underinvestment in this sector is still an issue because of the regulatory here and there. So we need to ensure that as a country, if we say this is 56% of our budget, let us pay attention to the things that we need to remove or deal with very decisively to ensure that we get that 2 million. We can't be saying NNPC this, NNPC that. You know, NNPC is a whole, is another discussion altogether. What we need to do to revamp NNPC, what we need to do to have governance in place, what we need to do to ensure that NNPC works. But that's another day's discussion. So oil theft, we need to deal with it. Why? Because it's so easy to know who are those stealing the crude. I hear that, you know, that you have gadgets all over the place to monitor everything that is monitorable. So why are we still discussing oil theft in 2025? That means that we need the political courage to actually do something about oil theft. But if we have said we want to get 2 million, perhaps we will now build the courage that we need to actually deal with the issue and, you know, eliminate it or reduce it to the barest minimum. So effective implementation of PIA is very important. I'm not going to dwell on this too much. Bismarck has talked about it. 15%, if it's 10%, it is, if it's going to 20%, it's just, we need to get production up. We need to get production. If we don't get production up, we can't employ people. Inflation will continue to rise. Food inflation is high. We need to get security fixed. We need to get the help the farmers and all of those things. We know what to do. I believe in this country. We know what to do. We're not bereft of ideas. We just don't have the political will, the courage to do what needs to be done. So the 2025 budget presents both opportunities and challenges for the Nigerian economy. And while we have an ambitious plan for infrastructure development, it's important to deal with all of these, you know, ancillary issues so that we know that we're moving in the right direction. I want to thank you again to ICAN for organizing this. Thank you. I believe that the conversation should continue, and we'll see that we'll make progress, and our future, the future of our dear nation, will be prosperous, and we all will be happy for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Chinyere Almona, FCA, the DG of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you so much for that highly intellectual presentation. I can see our participants already celebrating that excellent presentation. Thank you so much, madam. We really appreciate your time on this program today. Thank you so much. We appreciate. Yes, now we want to move to the interactive session. Participants have already sent in questions, and this is how we are going to actually follow it. So some questions are specific to a presenter. So that one, I will call on that presenter to take on that question. While those that are general, please permit me to just call on one of the speakers to attend to that question. Then also for the participants, some questions may actually, if they've been taken by the other question, then there may not be need for repetition of such question. So I think we can commence the interactive section now. The very first question is for Mr. Bismarck Rewani, and that's been taken or been asked by Kehinde Titiloye. Said, sir, has Nigeria fully removed the subsidy now? Because I listened to you on Channels Television sometimes early last year, where you mentioned that the government had not yet fully removed the subsidy. Could you please clarify this? That was the very first question for you, sir.
Well, subsidies have not been removed, and neither will they be removed. Subsidies have been reduced. And like I said earlier on, that subsidies are reverse taxes, not reverse taxes. Therefore, as you reduce the subsidy, you are actually increasing the taxes. And as you increase the taxes, you are reducing the income of people. The assumption is that the money that goes from your pocket to the government will be used efficiently, and with a multiplier effect will increase. The government will have more money for health, education, and roads and infrastructure. But when subsidies are reduced and the income of government is increased, it is not properly and efficiently deployed, you will have a negative multiplier. And that is what we are seeing now. But first and foremost, let's deal with the problem. Let's build the revenue. Then we now deal with the efficient use of the revenue. And that's where you, the accountants, come in to ensure that the money that is raised or the money that is deployed or taken away from the people and put into the government is well used. Remember vividly when we had Shaw P. Again, the money was removed and it was stranded. They didn't do anything with it, and therefore it had a negative multiplier, and the economy went into a recession. This time, though, we are seeing signs that some money is going back into the system. Whether it's going back, if it goes back in the form of palliatives, it don't do much. It has to go back in form of actually investments and actually deploying resources where they have the highest multiplier effect, and linkages, what we call linkages, so that if one sector pulls the other with it, then you will see the effect. So my answer to your question one, no, subsidies have not been removed, and I don't think the intention is to remove subsidies. The intention is to actually reduce it. And then second intention is to shift the subsidies away from consumption and wasteful, what we call ostentatious expenditure, to much more productive uses. Thirdly, that if this shift in income goes from people to government, you, the accountants, ICAN accountants and all of that, must ensure on your own part to ensure that the money is not stolen. So we have whistleblowing, we have certification of accounts from federal, state, and local governments, and then holding people to account to ensure that they deliver value, because money stolen is money taken away from the system. It doesn't help. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Still for you, another question for you too. Sir, the budget assumption, this is a question from Jacob and Chido Arinze. Sir, the budget assumptions on inflation and exchange rates are not realistic. Therefore, it impacts on the budget integrity. What are the ways to improve the budget transparency, strengthen budget oversight, and promote citizen participation?
No, I think that the budget assumption, which was revised to 1,500 naira per dollar, is realistic. So it's not that far away from its purchasing power parity value. One. Two, the budget assumption on inflation is not realistic. I don't think it is. I think it's ambitious. But again, if we look at Ghana, Ghana's inflation went as high as 54% and is now down to around 27, 28%. Because of certain measures. So I think that, like I said, I am still waiting to see the effect of the reconstitution of the basket for inflation and also the rebasing of the economy. But what I was warning to this audience, august audience of chartered accountants, is that let's not be carried away by the announcement effect of those changes, because that is not the point. The reality, what we should have done, when you make a change to the base year or the basket, you have to go back and you apply those assumptions backwards to the last 2, 3, 4 years and see what effect, so that you are comparing likes with likes. What has happened when we changed the methodology for unemployment was that the unemployment numbers lost credibility, and nobody's interested in it. Nobody's going to fund unemployment studies anymore, or if they do, they'll do it reluctantly. Therefore, it's important that we use statistics efficiently and with integrity in mind, so that we're not having a situation where the data is being used as political sound bites rather than analytical thinking. Because out of the analysis will come thoughts, and out of those thoughts will come decisions, and out of those decisions will have an impact. So I still believe that we have some work to do in terms of ensuring that at the end of the day, economic policy ends up making the people's welfare higher and better, rather than impoverishing them and making them sad and prone to crisis.
Thank you very much, sir, for that succinct response to the question. And let me move to Dr. Olushola Oloye, FCA, for the next question. Sir, these are two questions, but there is a similarity, so I will take them together. The first one, Nigeria has been over-dependent on crude oil, thereby neglecting other sectors that can boost our revenue. What do you think the government can do for Nigeria to move from a deficit budget dependent nation to possible having yearly surplus budgets? That's a question from Adeyemi. Then the next one that looks so similar is that we build our budget around crude oil. This is not the only natural resource Nigeria has. Why can we expand our budgeting to include a basket of resources beyond oil, to include revenue from cocoa, cashew, gold, and other resources? Is this workable? These are for you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. And for that particular question that has to do with dealing with, instead of us basing almost everything on oil revenue, I think this budget, one of the things that this budget aims to achieve is to diversify the revenue source. And, Nigeria is already looking at option of, agriculture as another means to sustain the economy. A whole lot is also being done in other areas whereby most of the informal sector part of the economy now comes into the whole revenue base of the economy. So a lot is being done on infrastructure side. A lot is being done on agriculture. A lot of investment is also going into the health and the education sector, even though they are more from the social part of things. But when we get things a bit more structured in other areas, there are quite a lot of informal sector within the nation that should be generating, revenue for the government. And that's why when we even increase the tax base, which is the work of the Fiscal and the Monetary Policy Committee, the level of their work has also increased the revenue base from the tax point of view. So Nigeria is trying to diversify as much as possible, and government is trying to put more investment around issue of, technology, agriculture, infrastructure. These other parts will really will help the nation to be able to generate better revenue. We can also see what is happening in the social space, what is happening with the likes of Facebook, the likes of Instagram, and quite a lot of other areas, the social part that is now bringing some level of income. And entertainment is also a very huge area. A lot of non-oil, service area will help us to diversify the revenue base. So it's possible. Once we set our mind and we are ready to also execute and implement in the right way and manner, we will be able to move forward in this regards. And I think Dr. Chinyere made mention of that from LCC, that instead of us making our agricultural product goes out there and then it's refined and then we have to use billions to bring it back. So a lot of investment in infrastructure and technology will help us to be able to process most of those agricultural products, and then we can earn direct revenue from all of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olushola. So let me now move to Dr. Chinyere for this next question. Kingsley Habo is asking this question. The positive aspects projected by this budget will be based on ideal situation, all things being equal. As the problem of our budget has always been poor implementation and any other factor, what effort can be done to evade this from happening in terms of poor implementation of Nigerian budget, ma'am?
Thank you. So I agree completely that our problem has always been around implementation. And what can we do? There are several reforms that we have put out there that we need to follow through. One way to ensure that implementation happens is appropriate monitoring. In fact, by the time you even put out the reform initiative, what were the indicators? What are you expecting to see in 3 months, in 6 months, in 1 year? What are the indicators and who is monitoring, who is checking, and who is reporting to who? There isn't any framework at all to ensure that implementation happens. So it's very difficult for it to happen just because we put out a budget, which is a tool, or we have any guideline at all. The other thing is to for the budget to really prioritize essential expenditure. So allocating resources to high priority areas. I talked about education and healthcare. I think they're high priority. Infrastructure is also high priority, and we'll put allocation in that area. But we need to be disciplined. So I say there's a lot of fiscal discipline required to push through on the things that we want to accomplish. Also, I believe that to a large extent, we need a civil service reform. The civil service base is quite large and it's very inefficient. So we need to ensure that we get, there should be some level of performance-based pay or performance-based assessment or something that encourages performance to happen in the civil service. I don't think that we should be okay with our civil service not being productive. And also we need to introduce technology and automation in a lot of things, because there is, even for us at the private sector level, we face a lot of frustration when we need to get permits or get concession or get any conversation you need to have with civil service. There's a lot of bottlenecks and it is frustrating. So it's not enhancing the ease of doing business. So, I do agree that, execution is always a challenge, but there are things that can be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chinyere, for your response to the question. Thank you so much. Let me go back to Mr. Bismarck for the next 2 to 3 questions because they are specific to him. The first one from Jacob Arinze says, sir, don't you think that the high debt servicing allocation of 15.81 trillion naira underscores the need for prudent debt management to avoid exacerbating the nation's debt burden?
Yes, that question number 1.
Yes, sir.
Debt service. You said there are 3 questions.
Yes, should I take the 3 at a go?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the first one. Don't you think that the high debt servicing allocation of 15.81 trillion naira underscores the need for prudent debt management to avoid exacerbating the nation's debt burden? That's the first one. The second one from Nemford Dimka. So knowing fully well that revenue is critical as well as growth, what practical steps must the Nigerian economy take now to reverse the vicious circle of deficit financing in our budget in Nigeria, such that going forward, Nigeria can go beyond deficit financing for our budget? And the third one from Amadi Friday, this is 2 in 1. Sir, considering the resistance of the governors on the independence of the local government authorities, how will the budget actually reflect in the local governments? We need specialized training for the local government audits. How can the Institute provide this? That will be taken by the Institute. Let me leave this for you, sir. Considering the resistance of the governors on the independence of the local government authorities, how will the budget actually reflect in the local government authorities? Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. The first question about debt service burden, I want you to contextualize this. One is the fact that the debt service has two elements. One, principal repayment, the other one, interest. In the past 10, 15 years, we have had interest rates, treasury interest rates, which is where the rate at which the government borrows, as low as 2 or 3%, whilst the government is actually spending in an environment where inflation was higher than 20%. So generally speaking, the Nigerian public and the Nigerian investors were 18% per annum below water. In other words, this is what has happened. So the savings culture was reduced. The impact on mobilization of capital was reduced. Now, what has happened in the last year or two is that interest rates on treasury bills have gone as high as 18% per annum for 90 days and 27% effectively, or 28% per annum on 365 days. Therefore, where the government was borrowing at 2% per annum, they are now borrowing effectively at almost 20% per annum. And that is one of the reasons why the debt service figure is higher. Alternatively, if we did not borrow from the money from the market at those rates, we would have been left in the situation which we found ourselves borrowing by ways and means, which means the federal government was printing money. The central bank was printing money to give to the federal government to spend. And that was the reason why we had high inflationary pressure. So now that that has been corrected, you are now beginning to see there's a tapering or moderation in the level of inflation, gradual but slowly. And that is different. That is why the debt service burden is high, but you have no alternative than to pay that. But it's not just a question of debt, the level of debt. What are you using this money to do? If you are borrowing money to spend on consumption, if you are borrowing money to lavish on productive expenditure, then it comes back to bite you. So I think that's one thing. One is the debt and the debt service, but the question you must ask, what are the debt proceeds being used to accomplish? And if you look at the states that have the highest debt level, debt burden, they are the ones that are the most unproductive, right? So, we are not here to criticize states or federal government as to their spending, but I want to address the first question that the increased debt service is as a result of higher interest rates, and higher interest rates are a result of high inflation. And when inflation begins to moderate, you will see that interest rates will go down and the debt service level will go down. And I'm talking about domestic debt here. The international debt is another issue because that you need to service with your exports or borrowing, and that can be a problem, and that has to be addressed. Second question was revenue is critical as growth in deficit, and what deficit financing alternatives do you have? No, I'm saying that revenue growth is important. Revenue growth is necessary. Revenue growth is critical, but revenue increases, but growth as a function, growth as a variable that is dependent on confidence, growth, which is driven by an investment-led strategy, is also much more important than just revenue on its own. So we always say revenue is necessary and revenue plus growth is sufficient. Third point, resistance of governors to independence of local governments. Well, turkeys don't vote for Christmas, as you all know. The governors were actually an impediment to local government development. And they kept on saying local governments are not there yet, local governments are not there yet. But they must crawl before they walk. But if we wait for them to go through that process, we'll never get there. So what we're doing, or what I think I see happening, is that the local governments, the state governments, and the federal government are having to share money, share the allocation. That's the first thing. You, the accountants, have to now ensure that every local government must have, by statute, an accountant general in the local government. They must have a budget. They must have audited accounts. Yes, it may not be optimal at the beginning, but they will get there. You must. And they can actually outsource the financing function. The government must have, by statute, an accountant general in local government. They can outsource. They can outsource the functions, to accounting firms, where you can keep their books. You do that for small companies. You help them keep their books and keep their records and help prepare a budget for a fee. So I see this as an opportunity, a governance opportunity, because the people are accountable. I see this as a professional opportunity for accountants to do this. And with AI, you can sit down wherever you are and actually keep the books, keep the records, prepare the budget, do the cash flow projections as you do for companies, and everybody wins. The local government wins. The people, the citizens of the local government win because they get more accountability. The accounting firms win, and the Nigerian government wins. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bismarck Rewani, for those in-depth thoughts in responding to those questions. Thank you so much, sir. Let me move back to Dr. Olushola for the next two questions. Dr. Olushola, Yusuf Olalekan Saidi is asking, given a multiple budget in this year, just like you and Mr. Bismarck has alluded and agreed, and complex market system, Yusuf is asking, what should the professionals focus more attention on?
Thank you very much. Just like, Yusuf have mentioned, and it's important, I also make it known that most of the questions that are being asked, some of it, I've tried to address it on the Zoom chat. It's important that we are also following the Zoom chat for more detailed response to some of the questions that have been asked. But just to address that question very quickly, it's important to note, even though we have multiple budgets running concurrently, each of this budget has a specific objective and focus. Currently now, the current budget for 2025, which is going to come into implementation, looking at the one that is going to last till June, we just have to work with this budget concurrently, most especially looking at where the investment in each of the sector is going to go. And we also need most of the indicators to also drive the way we are going to go about, addressing most of this budget. We won't say because we have multiple budgets, we are just going to ignore one and pay attention only to the other. So what we will do is to work with both budgets, side by side, and making sure that we're able to align them, accordingly. And like one of the questions that have also been raised, that how do we get to do more analysis beyond just the expenditure part of the budget? Because if you look at most of the analysis that are generally available there, we need to also see what's happening on the revenue side and other metrics in terms of the sustainable development growth, in terms of the digital economy and technology. These are other areas of analysis that we need to also pay a lot of attention to. So when looking at the budget, it's not just the numbers, like one of the quotes I gave earlier. It's important that we look at both the supplementary that is currently running, and we look at this current one that is in context, so that we can put things in the right perspective. And there's provisions for the SMEs, for human capacity development. There's provision for renewable energy, and quite a lot of other part of the budget that we need to pay a lot of attention to. Thank you very much. Our anchor, we can't hear you again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olushola. The second question for you that is coming from Abiodun Oluwaseun Folarin is asking, what can the government do to bring down the general inflation in the economy vis-a-vis the 2025 budget?
Okay, looking at the 2025 budget and looking at the inflation rate, just like Mr. Bismarck Rewani have also mentioned, and I think if we look at the response that is out there, it's quite very ambitious that government is looking at 15% before the end of 2025. However, it's important to note that if we get most of the things right, we're able to get as much foreign direct investment into the country. We're able to diversify the economy. Let's see how we're able to use agriculture to better position the country, how we're able to do better in terms of infrastructure development, how we're able to do better in terms of, we have this other part of the economy that we have not been able to get a lot of mileage on. There are other natural resources in Nigeria beyond just oil. We have other products, we have other items that we can push, which currently I know a lot of reform is going on in the area of we being able to sell gold and other, natural resources from the country. And by the time it becomes a more formal sector, that we can be able to generate more. And beyond that, in terms of also the blue ocean, which is, we can also do quite a lot in that area in terms of, resources that comes from that other perspective. So it's important that we articulate most of the things. If we are able to do this and revenue goes up and the level of deficit comes down, the chances, there is high probability that the inflation will come down if we are able to do all of this. Beyond that, the issue of the ways and means, which has been put up, and now we are now dealing in a more transparent manner. If you're able to drive more efficiency by making sure that we get what we call value for money. Every government parastater drives value for money, efficiency, effectiveness, and economy in almost everything that we channel our resources into. We will be able to deliver a more better result, and inflation will come down.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lushola. Let me quickly go back to Dr. Chinyere as we wind down this session. A question from Jacob Ajidu-Arinze is asking the question, how does the budget help to reduce recurrent expenditure? How does the budget help to reduce the current expenditure?
So before I answer that question, please allow me to just add a bit more to what Dr. Lushola, Dr. Lushola just talked about, how to reduce inflation. Because a huge portion of our inflation is around food inflation, right? That's pushing everything up. And yes, he did mention it. He actually mentioned in his response. But I just wanted to add a bit more, because I am quite passionate about this agriculture, the sector, and what we need to do within that sector. Because if we can get it, if we can reduce food inflation, yes, food security will improve, but also inflation generally will moderate. And thinking about food inflation and what we need to do, so you think about the supply side and the demand side and what we can achieve. Somebody was saying to me, I think over the weekend, I don't remember the figure, but the percentage of the arable land, that the farmland that we're using in this country compared to what we can use is so tiny. And so it may be good to encourage sustainable land use and cultivation of all the underutilized areas, but also to improve productivity with modern farming techniques, high yield seeds, and the irrigation system, and also research. So there's a lot of research being done, but there's no coordination between what we are researching in the lab and the universities and what's happening on the ground. So we need to find ways to adopt some of these things so that we can improve efficiency, we can improve our yield. And also we need to pay attention to post-harvest losses, because a lot of times between the time we harvest the goods and when it gets to the table, that's the post-harvest losses, we experience a lot of that. And the cause of that problem is, one, the transport infrastructure is not there, so to move items across is difficult, and there's no capacity to preserve or process, and so we are losing a lot of even the little that we're able to produce, we are losing it. So this can help us in making the agri sector to be efficient. Now you have to remind me of my question. So what was my question? You wanted me to address how to reduce expenditure with budget. Was that
Yes,
it?
how does the budget help to reduce recurrent expenditure?
Okay, so like Mr. Bismarck said, budget is a tool, right? And within the budget, it will outline the recurrence as well as the capital. And with the budget itself won't reduce recurrent expenditure. We need to consciously plan out what are we using our revenue, the revenue that we say we're going to get based on this budget, or even the since a deficit budget, even the borrowing, what are we going to use it for? And so it's the I think leadership is important because leaders make decisions on what to do, what to put the money in. And so appointment process is also important, transparency in all of these things, and holding people accountable. So if, let's say, we have an indicator on, how much should we apportion to, laptops or payment of salary or any of those things, and we are checking to be sure that people are sticking to it, or even on doing less of that, then it is easy if we're monitoring to know when we have when we are getting close to the benchmark or to the high point and cut down. But then if you're holding people accountable for what they're doing, then that makes it easy. And this has to be done at both the federal level, the state level, and the local government level, because there's a lot of wastages in the system, and we need to be able to curtail that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chinyere. That's a very good response. Thank you so much. Dear participants, this is where we are going to draw a curtain on that interactive session because of our time. But Dr. Olusola has also gone ahead on the charts to also provide responses to some other questions. Please let's read through and see responses to those questions. While other questions that are yet to be responded to will be collated, and the responses will be availed from the Secretariat. Thank you very much. And now I want to once again thank all our speakers, the keynote speaker and the panelists for doing a very good job in this session. But now, without further ado, I want to call on the chairman of session, Alhaji Dr. Razak Jayola, FCA, the retired past president of our beloved institute, and for his closing remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, moderator. You've done really very, very wonderfully, and I think you deserve some bit of applause. Thank you so much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we draw this enlightening session to a close, I'd like to express my profound gratitude to all our esteemed speakers. Bismarck was there, and he really did wonderfully as expected. He has always been there for us. I remember he was the guest speaker at my 60th birthday at the Golden Gate Restaurant. So he has always been there for us. Thank you so much, Dr. Oluyeye, as well as Dr. Chinyere Almona. We are extremely, very, very grateful. The insights shared, particularly on Nigeria's fiscal environment and the innovative approaches to budgeting, have been not only thought-provoking, but also action-oriented. The analysis presented, including the challenges of multiple budgets in 1 year and the importance of aligning expenditure with realistic revenue projections, provides us with a clear direction for the future. It is evident that effective implementation, robust reforms, and a strong commitment to efficiency are key to achieving the transformative impact that our budgets are designed to deliver. In reflecting on today's discussions, I'm reminded of the pivotal role we all play in driving sustainable growth and development, whether through structural reforms, increased productivity, or fostering public-private partnerships. We each have a responsibility to ensure that our efforts translate into tangible benefits for the Nigerian economy and its citizens. We are reminded during this budget session, especially by Mr. Bismarck Riwani, that accountants have special role to play more than ever before in ensuring that the power now being given to local governments in terms of revenue needs a lot of management. We need to audit, and that is bringing to us a lot more work. So we need to really get prepared and make sure that we make our impact felt. Once again, I thank you all for your active participation and invaluable contributions. As we leave here today, let us carry the lessons learned into our respective spheres of influence, ensuring that our collective efforts lead to the prosperity and stability we envision. Thank you, and I wish you all safe travels back to your destinations. God bless you.
Thank you very much, revered past President Alhaji Dr. Razak Jayola, FCA, popularly known as AJ Silicon. Thank you so much, sir, for the good job done, sir. Now to thank you and thank our Diamond President, the keynote speakers, the panelists, and all the council members who are on this call. And that is the job that will be done and assignments that cannot be assigned. And that will be done by the Vice President of our beloved institute. I have the singular honor to bring on board the Vice President of our noble institute, Malam Haruna Yahya, MNI, FCA, for his vote of thanks. The VP, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, the moderator, the Diamond President of our institute, Chief DCS Alaribe, the chairman of the session, our revered past President Alhaji Razak Jayola, the first Deputy Vice President, the second, and all the council members present. It is my single honor on behalf of the Diamond President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria that I want to express our profound appreciation to you all for registering and participating in this virtual 2025 budget symposium of our great institute. This webinar with the theme Nigeria 2025 Budget, a reality check on the road to restoration, has investigated the practicable ways of improving the country budget process. The communique of this budget symposium will be issued and delivered to all participants and other stakeholders. I want to specifically acknowledge our revered past President, Alhaji Razak Jayola, for graciously chairing this session. Your continued support and contribution to the Institute and accounting profession is deeply appreciated. We are also immensely grateful to our distinguished keynote speaker, Mr. BJ Riwane, who I have known for the past 25 to 30 years during our FSB years. We thank you for coming, and our esteemed panelists, Dr. Lusola Onoye and Dr. Chiere Almona. We thank you for your sharing wealth of experience and insight with us. The keynote speaker have said that accountants, we are obsessed with revenue, about revenue. Well, sir, we are not only obsessed about revenue, we are also cost controller. We offer expert advice in both areas. As you are aware, a surplus budget can only be achieved either by increasing the revenue or reducing the cost. So we play a great role in these two areas and other areas that require our specialized advice. We have, as you've said, we have limited number of good accountants in the society, and it's a challenge to us as chartered accountants that we have a lot of work ahead of us. I also like to thank
Thank you very much, the Vice President, FCA, for the vote of thanks. Thank you so much, sir. We appreciate you. Having learned a lot from our eminent speakers on the occasion of the 2025 Budget Symposium, with the theme, A Reality Check on the Road to Restoration, we hope the session has been very insightful, impactful, and very enlightening. And please be informed that all those who have participated in this session for the required number of hours, they would earn 2 MPD credits from the stable of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. We say thank you for your participation and have a great day. I'm Tosin Akinwumi, the moderator. In closing, let's have the ICAN anthem and the national anthem. Technical, over to you.
Let's go right and found of treasure in triumph of an array, standing stronger in harmony, building a land together. Dreams of a founding fathers, we are striving to attain our truths and values that we share through all ages be sustained. Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. We uphold your integrity.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians old and proud to serve our sovereign fatherland.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great day ahead. Thank you.